Okay.
Okay, we're all set.
Well, good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Land Use and Economic Development Subcommittee of Council. All members of the committee are present. That includes Councilman Curtin, Councilman DiLorenzo, Councilman Wong, and myself. Under old business, we're talking about the tax increment financing project.
We're all set.
And there are three meeting of the Land Use and Economic Development Subcommittee of Council. All members, that's not good. Okay, we're getting a loop there. So I'd like to turn the meeting at this point over to Jose Geiner, who is the lead from the staff on the TIF project for an update. And I'm sure he will turn it over to Mr. Goldman and Mr. Poland. Go ahead.
Yes, just welcome and good evening, everyone. I just, as you know, we've been working on a TIF districts in town. The Toby and which home in New York is pretty much complete. Completing. I think there was a few items that they mentioned at today's EDC meeting that still was required to be done. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Don. Is Don gonna? I think Don's gonna do the presentations, and then I'll have the screen sharing. So,
okay,
Don Poland, going in New York.
You're muted, Don.
Bear with me here for a second. All right, now you should be seeing my screen.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this presentation, a lot of it you've already seen because of the town center and the Toby Road stuff has remained virtually the same. I'm going to flip through some portions of this then very quickly because I want to focus in on Blue Hills. So essentially, we've continued to make progress on the TIF study and the report. As you see here, this map of the town, we now have the town center TIF district, the Toby Road TIF district, and what I'll be talking about tonight, the addition of the Blue Hills TIF district.
We only have the front page here, Don.
Yeah.
Oh, and let me stop and start sharing again because I'm scrolling through. Whoop. Are you seeing Toby Road right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Map.
Okay, good. So that was just the town-wide map I was just discussing. I'm not going to go back to it since we're going to focus in on Blue Hills. So now you should be seeing TIF District 3, Blue Hills. And essentially, we started working with the boundary we had established some time ago. This includes all of the fronting parcels along Blue Hills Avenue. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along. This morning in the EDC meeting, I brought up three specific areas. One is this area up here, which is an old, not sure if it's subdivision or a lot of record, but an old area that has a bunch of old small lots in it that are undeveloped. And as Jose alerted us today, there are substantial wetlands up there. But we are pulling this area into the TIF district to maybe create some future opportunity there. The next is the former school, which is now owned by a nonprofit and has been a learning center in recent times. It's lost its current tenant and I believe is now vacant. We are also going to pull in the ball field lots and the school property into the TIF district. And then moving south into the lower Blue Hills area, the decision was made to pull in the industrial park here that comes in off of Blue Hills Avenue. So from what you're seeing right now until next week, hopefully when we get the draft plan out, or within the next 2 weeks, we get the draft plan out, these additional areas on the Blue Hill District are going to be analyzed and drawn into it. Whether they remain or not, I guess will remain to be seen. We want to see what the district looks like with them and the impact as to value and so forth. Moving along, we've mapped the zoning in the district. We've mapped the assessed values within the district, and ultimately the assessed value of the total district as is right now is around 18 million. We expect that to move up substantially with the addition of the three areas. Most of that value is going to be found ultimately in that industrial park on the lower Blue Hills section of the area. Just as I did with Town Center and with Toby Road, we've started to go through and create the potential public improvements for the Blue Hills TIF district. I'm still working on this. So this table is not finalized as of yet, but it's probably about 80% complete. One thing is, if you look at the upper Blue Hills area north of Cottage Grove Road, all the side streets on the western side, the sidewalks at intersections wrap the corner property down the side street to the back rear lot. That's not the case on the eastern side, and for a few reasons. One is to kind of create this uniformity. Two is to create that pedestrian connection to the residential blocks behind, proposing that those sidewalks be completed on the corner properties. Also, the improvement of, on the eastern side, improving the corners of the sidewalks to the ADA standards. There's 22 bus stop locations within the total corridor. So we're planning for up to, and I'm using the maximum figure here of 22 shelters. I'm not sure all 22 locations justify shelters, but we are planning for the maximum of up to 22 shelters. This is similar to what we did both in Toby Road and also the Town Center. And then one of the interesting challenges within the area, or what I think is a quality that kind of degrades the area a bit, is on the northern portion, the upper Blue Hills portion, north of Cottage Grove Road. If you look at the street right away, the area essentially between the curb of the road and the sidewalk, on some of the properties that have gone through newer, more recent site plan approval processes, you see a higher quality of landscaping and property maintenance within this area. On the older properties, the conditions within this area, the tree belt or the snow shelf between the sidewalk and the road, has deteriorated pretty greatly. So I think actual landscaping improvements in this area along the public right-of-way would go a long way to improving the aesthetic appeal of the area. And then, forgive me here, it says landscaping, it should just say street banners. But essentially, as we did with the Town Center and with Toby Road, the installation of street banners. One additional thing, it'll be part of the public improvements, and the reason why I say, or the private improvements, the reason why I say this isn't completed fully yet is the consideration of a facade improvement program within this area. If I go back to the maps, which I meant to mention earlier, as with Toby Road and the Town Center, in both those districts, we had kind of a targeted property that we think, like Winterberry Mall or like the undeveloped land to the rear of Toby Road. We've had a property that we think is prime for a development opportunity. Within this district, it is this northern area here, which is 1051 to 1057 Blue Hills Ave. This is the older strip plaza north of Park Avenue that we are focused on. We haven't completed the concept plans as of yet, so we are working on those. They're hopefully going to be wrapped up next week, and they will be presented as part of the final draft plan, but we're looking at that site for a individualized kind of redevelopment opportunity. This table from the last time you saw it has also changed in that we've added additional financial resources to the operational management plan to handle the addition of the Blue Hills district. And as conceptualized at this point in time is kind of a single entity overseeing all three TIF districts rather than all three TIF districts operating independent of themselves. And that's how it's conceptualized at this point, which may be open to further discussion through the draft phase. So where we are, basically I said this morning, we've got a 92 to somewhere between a 90 and 92% completed plan. And I'll just show you the plan very quickly after I finish with this slide. So we need to finalize the cost for public and private improvements, also do the combined costs for all three districts tied together, complete the master plans for each of the TIF districts. This is an individual map showing all the proposed potential improvements in each of the districts, and then finalize the conceptual developments for the target site in the Blue Hills Ave corridor. And then I need to give it a final read and edits. Mike will give it a final read and edits. Mike and I will probably argue a bit over numbers, and then we'll tighten those up. And then ultimately, we are prepared to issue the draft plan by the end of August, hopefully a little bit sooner than that. And at that time, the draft plan can be forwarded for legal review. And then once we go through kind of the review and comment period in September, we'll make any final revisions that are needed. Just very quickly, if you will amuse me for a moment here. I know this has been pretty abstract and that you guys have been seeing PowerPoint presentations. So I just want to give you a quick look. This is the table of contents. It's essentially a 56-page document right now. I think it'll land somewhere between 65 and 70 pages once we finish the appendix to it. But just for your reference, when I said things in that final slide there about we need to tighten up numbers and so forth, we have placeholders here for kind of numbers and tables, and all these final calculations have to be done to work through the ultimate finances of this. Right now, because of the addition of the Blue Hills district, these are not able to be finalized. So that's some of the basic editing and tightening up that needs to be done. All the maps are already inserted, even though there will still be some changes to them. But it gives you a feel for how the overall plan is coming into shape and is really near completion at this point. So I will stop, and if anyone has any questions or comments, I'm open to hear them and available to discuss anything. So thank you.
Well, we all have to understand, I believe, that what you have done to date in terms of some of these public improvements is a way to create a placeholder for money to estimate what we can do. There's been no design development, I don't believe, in terms of any of the details. Is there? I mean, in terms of each one of these three districts is very different and might require a different treatment, and we haven't even discussed that yet.
Right, and to be honest with you, Dave, I've left that for kind of the future speccing of the project. So just to say, if you decided that you are ready to do light fixtures in town center, then I think you should engage in a discussion, and B, in all of those plans, all of those tables, if I can find them in the plan document here, they all have a contingency for design and light legal. So I would say when time comes to say do sidewalks and lighting in town center, then you engage a landscape design firm to help you with those final designs.
Okay.
I think it'd be a bit presumptuous to go into all of that in all three districts at this point.
Okay, no, I just want to put that out there so people know where we are, because it's hard to look at all of this and figure out, hey, we're ready to go. We're going to have somebody here next week making a bid, and we're really far from that.
I think it's very important for everyone to understand that this is really, it's intended to be a point of beginning and give you some things to think about, but it's your committee and perhaps others that should have input on what the priorities should be, perhaps add some other projects or delete some of the suggestions here. You know, our team has put together again, as a point of beginning and sort of a conceptual document, sort of a framework, maybe is a better way to call it, to help you start the two things that need to happen next. One is to actually adopt it and you go through the actual process of formally creating the districts themselves legally, and then setting up the structure and pulling together whatever committees or input you want to actually determine what the steps should be, what the priorities should be. You know, we've sort of created a framework to kind of help you with that, but I mean, it really begs for the community to either through the committees or through a public input process, however you want to do it, to actually then set up the tasks and the priorities and how to do things and so on.
So that raises it's a good segue to the question of at what point is this document in what stage is it ready for any kind of public presentation or discussion?
I think it is pretty close, subject to the next, the input from your committee and perhaps others, and our final drafts, and then it should go out, I think, to the overall public for comment and input. The important thing, though, is to get the legal framework set up, so that that input can actually go into the task list and the priority list and move from being kind of a framework guidance document to an actual implementation or actionable program run by a committee or however you decide to set it up.
Well, we haven't seen your draft there, but as you just sped through it quickly, there was something on implementation, which we've not heard anything about yet. At what point does the special counsel get involved before this goes public, I would think, or after, or what's your thoughts?
With the adoption of the district, you have the opportunity to establish a TIF district, I believe it's called Oversight or Advisory Committee. And at the end of the day, remember everything related to the TIF, what you end up deciding, the negotiation do with private developers, all that's ultimately going to be a council decision. So at the end of the day, it comes back to the council to make these decisions. But the statutory language provides the ability to establish an advisory committee made up of stakeholders from within the TIF districts to actually kind of provide governance or oversight to the actual districts. And I would recommend strongly considering that route and or designating someone like the Economic Development Commission as the advisory committee or the oversight committee for the TIFs.
Okay. One more question, and I'll open it up to maybe broader. For Jose, looking forward to actual council action, I would assume that there would be some staff recommendations as to what format the council's input would take, or what organization that Don just referenced is in terms of setting up the little committees for each one of these, or working through the EDC, some sort of implementation strategy needs to be pinned down, so we all know what's going to happen. I think that's an important consideration. Is that something in the works, Jose?
Yeah, once I get the full report, I'll put out a detailed timeline and recommendations as to how we should proceed, and what steps we need to take. So we don't either jump ahead or stall ourselves. So I will sit down with Don and Mike and come up with a game plan that hopefully that we'll be able to follow in an organized manner. Okay,
and it's obviously we'd require input or a comment from the EDC and the TPZ before, at some point, either before or after the council action. I don't know which should be proper.
Well, right, the TPZ does have a formal role in this. They do get a referral, and it's sort of like it works like an 8-24 kind of referral where they have to approve the plan or at least comment on it. So there is a formal role for the Planning and Zoning Commission to take on this.
Okay, so again, if you're saying the draft will be ready, say in June, uh, implementation strategies and movement through the proper channels should be defined so that we're all on the same page with that. That would be helpful. That's what we were talking about.
Yeah, we'll give you a game plan with steps that need to be taken and in the order they need to be taken.
Okay. Anybody else in the committee have a question at this point?
Yep, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'm so encouraged to see Blue Hills folded into this plan. And I'm excited. Thanks, Don and Mike. You know, I've been pretty loud about that since November. But so I'm anxious to see the final product and kind of the final numbers, I believe next week when you route that back to council. And so just to clear that up, Jose, I believe, because I don't see Robert on here, but I believe the next step from a council perspective would either be an advisory type of situation that you alluded to regarding either the EC being kind of that advisory function and or an ad hoc committee being that advisory function. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, I think what Don was saying is probably the best thing if you can organize is to have each district have its own advisory committee made up of people within the district and others. But certainly the EDC could have a role in that also. Maybe someone from the EDC can sit on that ad hoc. I don't know if you have any ideas, Mike or Don, on that. But
yeah, I think you're right, Jose. I think it's really important to have representation from people within each district.
Okay, wonderful. And I believe, I just want to firm up my understanding is that when we have these three separate functions for each of the TIFs, we could simply or simultaneously pursue development in either or, because I believe in the financial snapshot that you showed, Don, it was essentially resources to oversee all three TIF districts. Okay. And when does that money need to be approved or provided? At what point do we address that?
So there's kind of three sets of tables within the plan. One is the estimated costs and tax revenues related to those specific development sites like Winterberry Mall. There's then the estimated cost of public improvements for the district itself. So lighting, sidewalks, bus shelters, and so forth. And then there's the maintenance operation plan, which is the kind of administrative funds to oversee kind of the implementation of it. Now it conceptualizes, for example, a TIF district manager. Whether that actually comes to fruition is yet to be seen. That could ultimately be kind of designated as a role for, not to put more work on Jose, but just to say for his department to be the TIF district management. If things picked up over time, you may want to hire, a district manager to oversee that. In that budget, I had included things like there was money for marketing, for public art, kind of these joint funds that could be used across all three districts. How this ends up playing out, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, the public improvements become kind of complicated in the sense that until you have private development coming forward or new value within the district to capture, you can't really use the TIF to actually be doing sidewalks and bus shelters. So there becomes this kind of chicken and the egg. Now you could, as a community, decide to do your own bonding to do the sidewalks, just to say yourself to start interest in the area, but that would probably be an action outside of the TIF itself. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Don. And just in reference to a simple question for the bus stands, were those also heated? And they do heated bus stands. Are we giving our people heat?
I didn't do heated bus stands, just a fairly middle of the road enclosed bus stand is about $17,000. So I didn't go the heated route. Once again, that's something that could be explored in design. So,
Just curious.
Yeah,
Thank you.
again, I
So-
think it's really important to understand this document as setting up a framework. You know, the next steps are for us to finish our work, let Jose have the final review of it and perhaps others, and then have it go before council for discussion and really endorsement, I think, at this stage by council. And then at that point, hopefully Bloomfield moves ahead and hires legal counsel then to put together the legal side of this discussion. That gets done. Council then takes that and finally votes to create the actual districts, the formal districts, in accordance with the legal sort of framework that gets set up by your legal counsel. Once that's done, then the districts exist. And as part of the council setting it up, presumably council is going to make some decisions about how they want those districts to be run and so on. And also as part of that, creating the committees to run it. The committees then take our work and they go through it. And if they want to come back and recommend heated bus shelters or whatever they want, they at that point they're running the districts. We'll be available to advise them, but as will many others. But at that point, the advisory committee can come back to council with whatever recommendations they want to make, and council can either go ahead with them or not. You know, depending on how you structure it, council may essentially freeze the value of the assets of the assets in all these districts, and then devote any increase in value and the resultant tax revenue from that increase to the TIF district structure, and let the TIF district structure then come back to advise council on how they want that money, that incremental increase in taxes, to be used. So it's a process. It sounds more complicated than it really is. And there's lots of us who will be available to advise and help in the background. But I mean, at that point, our work really is conceptual. We're not suggesting to this committee or to council that these are the things you must do. These are simply things that you can do once this is all set up.
I'd like to follow up on that last question. Don talked about the implementation of public improvements. It was also on my mind. We have two districts that are pretty much more appropriate for small lot development, which would delay public improvements because you'd have to reach a certain critical mass in order to be able to afford them, as opposed to the town center mall, which would be one developer, one big project. So it would behoove us to consider some way of putting up some money for it to, seed money at that point, or at what point would we put up seed money for some of these improvements? Because I think it's important to give smaller developments an opportunity to play here.
yeah. So go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just going to say that again. I think the Connecticut legislature built a lot of flexibility into how these things can be done. So once it's set up and the structure's in place, council can decide based on input of the advisory committee, if, for example, they want to set aside incremental increases in tax revenue over and above the date that this structure is set up, and use that incremental increase in tax revenue to fund some of the lower cost projects that you were referencing a minute ago. If it's a big project, though, requiring a lot of money, then the council's advice, or the advice of the advisory committee to council and council's agreement, might be to say, okay, well, let's bond for that, because that's millions. That's not 30,000 or 40,000, which we can cover simply by incremental increases in tax revenue. But instead, maybe we want to bond for that, raise the millions of dollars, and use the incremental increases in tax revenue to service those bonds. So again, there's a lot of flexibility to do projects large and small in this, but each, depending on the size of the project, you may structure it different ways, and that's great. It's a good thing.
Okay, and it's not simple; it's complex. Mike, Jose.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that in all three districts there are at least one or two parcels that are large enough to host a large project. In the Blue Hills district, we have the old drive-in, which is about 10-acre site that's undeveloped. That if you really wanted to attract something nice there, and it would provide some funding for the for the improvements in the Toby, the property just south of Capaco, which, at one time you pay wanted to go in there. That's a large vacant piece of property along with the Monsanto, which I think is another 6 or 7 acres on the corner of Toby and in southwestern corner. So you do have, all 3 districts do have a potential for attracting large projects if we try to promote them.
Okay, as long as
And
timing works.
if I could just, I think that's an important point to be made here, is that we have identified at least a parcel in each that we think is prime for development opportunity. As Jose pointed out, there are other parcels available too. The fact is, the adoption of the TIF, getting, media accounts, getting word out there. We have these 3 TIF districts. They're in these locations. We want investment. We're here to work with, developers and ideas. That marketing kind of component, that generating energy around these districts are as important as the nuts and bolts of the districts themselves. And if you can attract that new development in, then you will generate new tax revenue that can be captured to fund the TIF. So.
Okay. Let me go to Councilman Curtin. You had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for not being able to use my camera tonight. But I just want to, first I want to thank both Mike and Don for kind of putting this together and having all 3 districts included and giving us options. But where I'm at right now is trying to figure out exactly if, council, TPZ, and the various committees that have oversight, what kind of time frame are we looking at to say, okay, if everything goes as we plan, everything signs off, the public and so on, what are we looking at as far as a plan where we can start marketing these districts? That's the first question.
If I had to guess, through the approval process, draft end of this month, review by EDC, this committee in September, referral out, referral for legal review at the same time, referral out to PZC for a reference. I would say October is probably ambitious, but November adoption by council is probably realistic. On a long stretch, definitely by the end of the year, but I think November is a realistic time frame at this point.
Yeah, because I believe we have an opportunity, because I think there will be capital circulating within the market after COVID-19, and obviously, the government plays a portion in that, and so I'm just trying to make sure that we have a plan in place where we could be at the head of that, at head of the game, and making sure that we're able to market it. So I think if that's what you're saying, that's an estimate. I think that's a reasonable projection to start having something in place that we can then start getting it out there in the public. Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks.
Councilman De Lorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, good evening, everybody. I just also wanted to add my thanks. I am happy to see that 3rd district in there, the Blue Hills Avenue. So thank you for that and your presentation. I had received it through email, so I did see a lot of the other slides previously. My question was around the lawyer. So you'd mentioned, as part of the next steps, we would conduct all these reviews, and then it would go through to legal for review. So when you say legal, are you referring to the town attorney, Mr. Needleman, or are you referring to the attorney that, as far as I know, we still haven't hired, who is going to formalize the whole district for us, the TIF districts for us and everything else? So what attorney would be reviewing the package?
This time, I think the attorney that we had identified as the preliminary plan attorney, Mike Adriano, would be the one that would make sure that we had all our ducks in order for adopting those 3 districts.
Okay, so have we engaged him, Jose? Is he, on standby? Is he
Yeah, well, I guess he's on standby. We chose him. We haven't paid him. We haven't come up with any kind of agreement. I think Mark Needleman was waiting to see what came out of with the study to be able to get an estimate as to what it would take. So now that
Okay.
we have a better idea, we could come up with a comparison, see what other towns have spent on a similar type plan and engage the Mr. Andriana. We haven't signed any formal contract. We did do interviews and he was chosen as
So what?
He's the most experienced with this work, and we've worked with him before. He also essentially wrote the current Connecticut legislation, so he's a good choice.
Okay, good. Yeah. So what happened to the 60K that we had reserved for the costs for this?
went back in the general fund.
Back
as
to
of
the general fund.
July 1st.
So
So you
it
understand
seemed-
that we'd be back.
Right. Okay. So I would say that you're going to need to get that in motion if we're going to try to meet a November, timeline. That's going to have to go to the finance committee. It's going to have to go to council, to approve funds to get the attorney. Then I would want to get him booked so we could have him do this review and start to tell us where we might have gaps, and then, get it moving, because, November's not really that far away. So that was my one question. My other question was, you were talking about maybe some of the smaller, doing some of the little projects that could maybe get started. So are we allowed to use SIP money for those projects, or how would we do that if we don't have, approved funding for a TIF district, if we haven't gone out? If we don't have a developer and we don't have someone who is, fronting that money, where would it come from for us to enable us to do some of the smaller projects?
Yeah, it's a good
Well,
question.
the town can always, yeah. Go ahead.
No,
I'm saying the town can always spend the money in which way it likes. If the town council wants to fund a project before we have TIF funds and use our regular funding for it, or even apply for grants or combinations, I think that's certainly within the purview of the council to do so. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mike.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think the question is, if in the absence of a project which would justify going out and bonding for it, in other words, some of the smaller projects, I think the plan is likely that council would like to say, all right, we're going to freeze the tax, the appraised value and the tax payments on the properties within District 3.
Mm-hmm.
And any additional value that comes in and additional tax revenue, in other words, incremental revenue, we're going to isolate that, and that can be used to pay. And you don't need to bond for that. You can just say any value that results in increased tax payments, we're going to isolate that money, and at some point we'll have a sort of a fund, if you will, that we can use to do some of these smaller projects. Now,
okay.
When would that money be available? It's only going to become available as the value of the property goes up, and or there's an incremental increase in the tax revenue. So that's hard in this environment particularly. That's
Right.
hard for anybody to predict.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. My last question, and then I'll turn this back over to the deputy mayor. I definitely agree with the advisory committees, and I do think it makes sense to have the advisory committee from each of the TIF districts. My question on that is, to me, and maybe you talked about this and I missed it, but we would still need an oversight committee or a governance committee that, yes, even though you have these three individual advisory committees who are working together, trying to determine what the needs are, would we then have one, like the chair of that TIF committee would then be part of the governance committee, or who should make up, kind of an oversight committee that would have final, that way you're getting input from all three districts and you're overseeing potentially, work being done, parts of work being done in all three?
Yeah, I think you're right to talk about the organizational structure. That decision really is up to council as to how you want to set it up.
Okay.
The parameters in the legislation are reasonably non-specific, I guess I would say. In
Right.
other words, if you want to set up, keep in mind, I don't know that any town has done multiple districts at the moment. So
Yeah.
you're doing some groundbreaking work, which we think
Yeah.
is terrific, by the way. I mean, this is the way to do it. So
Good.
I think if you set up the advisory committees, and I guess my advice would be try to keep them small and manageable.
Yeah.
Have some sort of oversight committee that's made up of members of that committee and perhaps other people, and they come to council. I think you want to make it as simple and as streamlined as you can, so it's responsive and nimble and so on.
Right. I agree with all of that. Okay. Okay.
But
I think
but it is council's decision. I mean, there isn't anything that says here's how you must structure these committees.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Again, Mike, I listened to your comment of keeping it simple. That's going to be the hardest thing we got to deal with here, because we've been talking about this for a long time and it still isn't simple. But I think the notion of having a TIF manager for one that covers 3 districts may help some of that communication, so it's not totally crazy. Any other councilman have something to say?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to add quickly to that. And I believe it's important for us to get that attorney in place, because for us to go through this process, you do need some sort of guidance to make sure that, we're following what we need to and not just jumping ahead and doing something that may come back to bite us later down the road. So I think that's something that we definitely want to have in place while we go through this.
Well, I would agree. I think it's important to work on the plan in the districts, but we ought to get that implementation strategy pretty much cleared up so that we all understand it before we can take it public. I had one more comment. I was a little bit concerned, and I don't know if I raised this at a previous meeting, about the development concept. The one that comes to my mind is the town center concept, which in a way departs from what was originally talked about in the plan of development. It doesn't provide the kind of streetscape, street frontage development to create pedestrian movement. It seems to be an interior development with a road through it. And I'm not sure you just did that to qualify for certain cost of improvements, or whether that's really what you're looking for with roads that come and go that may be problematic is where they meet Park Avenue and Wittenberry Avenue. And I'm just wondering if you have had or desire to have these concepts, which I only seen 2 so far, presented to the design review board to get their input on that, or somebody's input, because I think we're departing here from what people were expecting to see here. It's going to a lot of your representation are buildings and lawns and parking lots. So we're going to have more asphalt. It's not consolidating. It's not going to, the image is going to be maybe as problematic as today's images or something. My thoughts.
Yeah, just kind of background here. First and foremost, Dave, I think what's important is these are concepts to inspire kind of discussion. They're not a finalized plan on this is what you should do. We conceptually, figured out how development could maybe work on this site, estimated cost, estimated tax value, to give you something to structure kind of the idea of the TIF around. My general feeling now is that, it would be an engaged discussion between the town and a developer who wanted to utilize the TIF to figure out what's going to work there from a development standpoint. The reason why Dusty and I differed from you guys on the town center plan was really the challenges or the limitations of Park Avenue as a state road. The fact that the likelihood of you getting on-street parking or angled-in parking there and having an engaged front was limited. So we kind of looked at the site and how could kind of a new main street be created within the site by kind of going through the site. So that was our concept. We are not wedded to that, nor are we telling you that's what you have to do. But at the end of the day, there's now these concepts there to kind of say to the development community that we're open to ideas for the redevelopment of this site We're interested in density. We're interested in mixed use. We're interested in walkability. How can you make it work? And then how can our TIF help you make it work?
I fully understand that. I think there needs to be a disclaimer with these sketches, though, is to say what they are intended to
Sure.
do.
That's a good idea.
Sure enough.
Yeah, I think that that would be a logical add to it. I think it's, first of all, the legislation requires that all the work we've done be done. I mean, that's, those are the requirements, point by point in the legislation, that there's plans and, costs and so on put together. It doesn't say that then is cast in stone and you must do that and only that. It's just that you have to kind of put plans together to get to the point where you actually create the districts. Once you create the districts, there's nothing that says that you've got to do nothing but implement what was put in the plan. I will tell you that I think one of the real advantages that we perceive to be out there for communities that are adopting TIF is that we know from what's going on that the world of retail and restaurants and bars and so on is changing dramatically. The retail, particularly retail, is going to look a lot different in the coming years than it did a year ago as a result of this move to online, this dramatic acceleration of the move to online. I was reading something the other day and it said, for example, in the demographic group of 65 years of age and older, the increase in ordering food for consumption at home, dinner basically, or lunch, has increased by 438%. I mean, we're seeing that across the board and everything, all the work we do. What was a convenience, being able to order things online, has become a necessity. And now that people have learned how to do it, I doubt that they're not all going to return to their old habits. Many are going to stay with the online version of that. And that's changing. We can't pick up an industry paper without seeing another bankruptcy notice of a fashion or jewelry or shoe retailer. So I think that one of the best things about the work that you're doing right now with respect to TIF is that it's really going to enable Bloomfield to be much more responsive to some of the changes that are occurring. And I think that's a great opportunity. I mean, it's the timing in that regard, as much as this COVID-19 situation is horrible on so many levels. The one thing we can say is that the timing of this relative to your work on TIF is making TIF a really important step forward, I think, for Bloomfield.
What you're saying is we'll be ready when the market's ready.
Yeah, and that's
a good time to be there. So we shouldn't necessarily rush until we're all sure what we're doing as well. So
you'll be well equipped to respond.
Yeah.
Really good.
Is India still on? India, you there? There's one.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
There's a if no other councilmen have questions, there's an attendee that has a question. We can open it up for one question.
Yes, the question is from Kim McCleary. He says, may I ask Mike and Don a question, or should I say a few questions? He wants to know if he can ask some questions. Yeah. So can I promote him to?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, hold on one second, Ken. Ken, are you there?
He's muted.
Okay, so I muted you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Ken.
Hey. So thanks for promoting me. Hello, Professor Poland. Long time no see. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
Good to see you all. I just have a few questions regarding the TIF. My first question is, as it relates to future tax dollars that are coming in, does the Board of Education have any standing in collecting some of those dollars from the TIF district?
I don't think so.
No. That's a good question. I don't recall having seen any reference to where the Board of Ed stands on this, but I think the answer is that to the degree that the council chooses to isolate the incremental increase in tax revenue and send it to TIF, that would be 100% of those dollars, I think is the answer. Don, do you have any sense of that?
Correct. I agree with your assessment, Mike.
Okay.
What about the fire districts? Does the fire district, since they have to service some of these TIF districts,
Yeah,
do they
it'd
have any?
It'd be the same, I think. Be the same
Okay.
answer.
Well, to the council, I think that should be clarified with the legal counsel that you hire. You should get a legal opinion, because I foresee that if
Yeah,
the
that's a good idea.
TIF districts are doing well or do well, you will see some of the other tax revenue folks like the Board of Education and the fire districts come make a complaint about they have some standards as it relates to some of the revenue. My next question is relates to future value. And I know when I was on council, there was a report, authored by you, Professor Poland, in regards to lack of public investment in the Lower Blue Hills area, in that corridor, and that the lack of government investment. So my question to you is, you identified, and you may have answered this, you identified one particular parcel for development. Is that one particular parcel going to generate enough revenue or increment funding to support other areas in the TIF district? So you have to have public investment. For example, the center, we're thinking about doing a new library, which is going to bring significant investment and future increase in value because you're doing a library. You have currently you have Philly Park being, significant investment is going there. So you're going to have more future investment. Then you have a plan across from Village Pizza to do a bed and breakfast. So there's a lot of plans and a lot of development that is particularly happening in the center, which is going to give significantly enough money for them to do future plans. But when you look at the Toby Road and the Blue Hills corridor, there's lack of government investment and lack of government or private investment there. So you may not be able to do as much as you would like to do over there because you don't have that increment funding. So how do we approach that?
So I think in general, I mean, at the end of the day, all places are not created equal. So I think you're right. And essentially what your assessment said is the town center is your strongest kind of market out of these three TIFs right now. That being said, in each of the TIF districts, we identified what we felt was a key property that has potential for development interest, especially with the TIF in the background of it. So in the town center, it's Windenberry. It's the undeveloped site down in Toby Road. And it's this older but larger site in this district. Once again, going back to the idea, the concept here is to inspire, to create interest. And the fact is, as Jose already pointed out, in the Blue Hills area, there are other available parcels that could be of interest to individuals. In any of the districts, in order to pull off large-scale public improvements, you are going to need to have substantial investment. So I would assume each district's going to move at a different speed. Each district's going to generate different levels of investment. But the more investment you can attract, the more, tax increment you can capture moving forward, and the more public investments in the future. That being said, in my presentation, I know tonight I didn't stop specifically on all the tables and go through them. I just looked quickly at the public improvements for Blue Hills. But there is a relationship between the tax value in the district and the cost of improvements that could be done through the TIF. So I believe there's over, $4 million in public improvements in the town center district versus 1.5 in the Blue Hills versus 1.2 in the Toby Road. That's in direct relationship to the assessed value of the district already. So.
Okay.
Wouldn't that cause for us to do, sorry, one or two more questions. Wouldn't that cause for us to try to get okay, sorry. Wouldn't that cause for us to get the value of the properties in the Toby Road and the Blue Hills district up so we can be competitive with the center? Because if you have developers coming in and they're seeing that the value of the Blue Hills district is hypothetically speaking, 1.1 million versus 4 million, they're going to try to choose the 4 million and not come to the 1.1 million because there's not, there's no incentive for them to do so. And then secondly, with the first question is a double question. The appointment of the boards and commissions, who is responsible for, because I know there's going to be a lot of back and forth of who's responsible for appointing these members. And so maybe with your legal counsel and committee work, maybe you would determine a process where maybe the mayor recommends with council confirmation. So I just want you to, give that some thought. And again, I thank you for allowing me to speak this evening.
You're welcome.
Dave, if I could just very quickly on his first question there, just remember on private investment, private development, separate from the public improvements, it's the current value of the property today versus the future value after developed. Whether it's, $60 million development at Winterberry or a $60 million multifamily development in Blue Hills, it's the difference between current and future is the increment, and then the amount of that increment that the town wants to be able to utilize towards incentivizing that development. So from the private investment standpoint, it's an equal and level playing field. There is kind of no difference here. And the more investment that comes in privately, the more funds you will have to actually do public investment. So, and I think each district has their own market, and each district could attract development with the adoption of the TIF moving forward.
All right, we have to move on, but I have one quick question for you. I thought in the beginning we may have been talking about the ability to move TIF funds between the 3 different areas under certain circumstances. Is that a possibility?
I think that's a question you're going to have to ask legal counsel. At this point, I can't see anything in the statute that says you can, and I can't see anything that says you can't. With statute being enabling, I would say if it doesn't expressly say you can do it, you can't do it. So I think you ask legal counsel when they do their review on that one.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. We look forward to seeing you, if not next month, the month after, with more information and details. This is a project in progress, and we all have to know what's happening before we sign on to it, I'm sure. So thank you very much. And you can stay, welcome to stay. I think you may have some other items on here you may want to hear. I don't know. But let's go on to discussion of council referred item, taking action resolution, opt into the STEEP grant program. I'll call on Jonathan Teasy.
Okay, yeah, so this was discussed at the administration subcommittee last month, and then at council, the last council meeting got referred to this council, I think, or this committee. And where we're at right now is kind of the discussion of do we want to stay in the Urban Act program or go into STEEP? And that is really a crystal ball question of what's going to happen in the future with the state as far as what kind of grants are going to become available, what kind of bonding are they going to be doing, and where do we think what would best serve the community as far as what our best chances are to bring in, the most grant funding to the community. I guess, beyond that, I don't, unless you guys, anybody else here wants more background, it's kind of questions just with respect to that particular topic, I think, is where we're at.
Yeah, it's like you say, it's a roll of the dice, because neither of these programs have been totally funded on a regular basis. And looking forward, we can doubt that the state is going to fund them and with great amounts of money in the future also. So it becomes a question of, do we wait for a larger amount? Do we play for a smaller amount? The smaller STEEP program is available to small communities. The larger program is available to a little bit larger communities, private developers, nonprofits. So there's a lot more pressure for that kind of money. So I think this is why your recommendation was supported by the Administration Economic Development Committee, Administration Education Committee at their last meeting, to move the ball forward in a very unknown time. But the real issue is the 4-year opt-out period, and will we lose anything by that? And who knows? Let's ask open for question. Anybody have any thoughts? Councilman Wong?
I do. I have several thoughts, and I want to reiterate kind of my stance hasn't changed since admin education, and the same comments that I echoed within council. And I feel that locking us out of urban grant programs for 4 years is not a smart move to opt into STEEP for $120,000 to complete the splash pad. I think that given our Goldman and York presentation just a few moments ago regarding the possible need to search for grant money to fund some of the smaller TIF projects, are we should keep that on our radar. In Jonathan or Jose, if you can shed some light on, through you, Mr. Chair, what is the correlation between actually applying for urban grant programs and receiving the funds? Have we been applying in the last few years? You know, and additionally, I want to echo my disappointment from a CROG grant standpoint, where we council, I believe, and I was there when we prioritized submitting an expansion of Blue Hill Streetscape project. And instead of that prioritization going in, we decided to submit an expansion on the bike trail, which in my opinion does not enhance the quality of life significantly as far as the need and prioritization goes from a need standpoint on areas of town that would need economic development more than others. So again, what is the correlation between actually applying for these grant programs with the Urban Act program? Or is it just, I believe we've been able to acquire millions across a 10-year period. And why haven't we looked into, if we want to complete the splash pad program, why haven't we looked into unearmarking certain projects that we already have that are not going to complete projects, and shifting them within the department to complete the splash pad rather than locking us out of 4 years of the urban grant program? Have we thought of that? Have we thought of unearmarking some things? I understand that the Farmington River Park item has earmarked a significant amount of dollars, but that isn't going to necessarily complete the Farmington River Park. I know that we have earmarked some things for the bridge program that we haven't seen too much movement on. Is that an option to shift around some of these funds to complete projects and then re-earmark them next budget season? Have we looked into that? And if so, what was the outcome? Thank you.
Okay, I'll take a stab at a few of those. With regard to moving, I mean, the STEEP funds, it's not really a matter of which project is identified. It really is just a matter of bringing $128,000 worth of grant monies into the town. And once they're spent on one project, that frees up that money to go elsewhere, potentially. So if we did do it on a different project, we could do it on one that's fully funded right now and freeze that $128,000 up to go elsewhere. That's also a possibility that could be looked at to go, you know, if we took 128,000, if we put in the, say the chiller project in Town Hall, well, that's fully funded right now. So that would free up 128,000 that could go elsewhere. So really it's more about bringing 128,000 into the town. You know, so that's that side of it. With respect to, in the past, we have occasionally, probably about every other year, we have put in something through the legislature towards the Urban Act program, sometimes successful, not oftentimes not. I guess I would say I think the town probably hasn't been leveraging itself or presenting itself perhaps as well as we could have with that program. As I said, I think at the council meeting, I think that is a much more political program. I think that it would behoove the town probably if we chose to go the Urban Act route to somehow engage some sort of, I'll call it lobbying. I think basically whether it be, you know, maybe someone like Goldman and York to, first of all, sit down to try to meet with DECD, whoever, you know, people who run the program with DECD to find out what they're looking for in a given year. They also look to the individual agencies with the state like DEP or DOT or whoever might be looking over that funding. Projects go through them to see if this is something they think is worthwhile. So you also would want to go sit down once you've identified some projects with the likely, you know, someone from the likely department who's involved in that, and find out what their take is on it. Which project do they like? What do, you know, what might work and not work? I mean, those are the steps I think that would benefit the town quite a bit towards trying to get more monies and being more successful. In the past, it's kind of been more of a last minute thing where a legislature comes to a legislator and says, hey, we're looking, you know, this bill's going in for this funding, put something together for us. And we're kind of working under the gun rather than being proactive on it. And I think that's a process we'd want to do if we go into the Urban Act. And I also do think the TIF, you know, as I sit here listening to it, it could be a big plus for that as well, because the Urban Act program is really primarily geared towards economic development for the communities and within the state. So to have a TIF adopted and to potentially have projects, improvement projects identified within those TIFs, I would think would be a pretty good selling point, again, for that program. So, you know, I mean, that there's an opportunity there for the potentially for Urban Act, but we still don't know what monies are going to become available through that, or even still how successful we might be. But those are, I think, points towards that.
Okay. So putting more energy into being proactive and utilizing and managing the urban grant program could be something that we could do. Now, do we have the resources and the manpower to be that proactive within our town department?
I don't know I mean, that's beyond me. I don't know who would make that decision about how we would, you know, I don't know who we have who might fill in that sort of lobbying role, if you will. That'd be something for the manager or maybe Jose to weigh in on, but.
Well, I think it's a good point. I think always felt that there's money sitting out there that we don't access, and that's a mistake. We should be looking for any money we can. So I think it goes without saying. Did you have anything else, Councilman Wong?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I thought we decided to do both the Blue Hills and the bike trail. And we have the first section of Blue Hills, which has taken 5 years to get to this point, which is at 50% design stage. With the moving toward implementation of that design stage, and with the addition of the TIF in the area, I think that gives us much more ammunition to go after more money in the second round for the north side, the north side of Blue Hills Avenue. So I think we're up against a time frame to make this decision. I don't think anybody is right or wrong. I don't know if there is a right or wrong in this decision, but we have to make a decision by the end of this week. For council has to act
next
on it
Monday. We got it. Yeah,
next week.
Yes. Next Monday.
Any other inputs from other council people who would like to make some observation? Councilman Curtin?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I know when this came up with council, we talked about it. I think Councilor Wong made a good point in regards to the locking in. I still haven't heard anything as far as if we went ahead with this, would that lock us out of anything else? And I think the point that we can, is that a no, Jonathan?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was just me. No, yeah. The only thing going ahead with Steep would lock us out of is Urban Act grant funding for the next 4 years.
Correct.
No other source.
So I agree with Councilor Wong on that. I don't think 120,000 or whatever the case may be, it's worth it, especially when you can look at other projects that may not move forward, and we can look at kind of reallocating some of that to, you know, the splash pad if we want to get it done. So until I get a little bit more information on that, I would be hesitant to give it a nod from my perspective, unless, you know, it's just not worth it. We're not talking about a lot of money here. I know it's 120,000 or plus or whatever the case may be, but it's not worth getting into something and then being locked out for potential greater funding. So if we can get some information on that by the end of this week, I think will be great. But we definitely could add this to the finance committee meeting for next month to kind of just evaluate some of those projects that are in the pipeline that may not be ready to go, and we could probably shift some things around. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I think the item that was mentioned by Councilwoman Wong was the Farmington River Park, which is funded in good part by a CREC donation as part of their development up there. I'm not sure that's available
don't-
for your assignment.
That's not my understanding, but we can, as Councilor Curtin
And I-
had
and-
said, we can kind of look into that at finance and
Yeah.
really, I was just thinking about Parks and Recs, just shifting it from splash pad to other something. I wasn't necessarily calling that particular project out, but we can
Well,
look at other things that we could kind of
Well-
shift easily between
Well,
departments.
that's going to be a full-time job over the next couple of years when we're trying to scrounge for money, I'm afraid. But yes, that's what we'll have to do, is see what we need and what we don't need. It's going to be difficult. So Councilman Di Lorenzo, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jonathan, just a quick question. So, and I'm sorry if you already said this and I missed it, but if the reverse is true and we continue in the urban program grant, does that mean you can't get you can't opt into STEEP grant for 4 years? Is the reverse?
No, you can opt into STEEP at any point. It's just, once you opt into STEEP, from that point for the next 4 years, you're opting out of Urban Act.
Okay.
So there's nothing, it's not a particular time sensitive thing for opting in.
Okay, so if we stayed in urban program, if STEEP comes out again, we could decide that we want to go to the STEEP and not urban.
Correct.
And whatever time point that is, then you have the 4 years.
And it should be noted with respect to that too, is that, because they're trying to get these STEEP grants out to as many communities as possible because of COVID-19, they've got a much smaller limit. Typically, STEEP grants go up to $500,000. So, if another thing were to come out, say next year, most likely the limits on the projects would be 500,000. So,
okay. All right. And then just my last question is, based on all you've heard now since the last council meeting and of course tonight, is your recommendation the same, that you think we should still go to the STEEP grant program? Or
the recommendation wasn't mine. It was a consensus of staff, and I'm not in a position to speak, to change their recommendation.
Gotcha. So that is still their recommendation, though, that we go to the
Yes.
grant and take the 150. Okay, so I guess unless I could be provided with some pros and cons to that, I'm almost thinking if that's available at other times, then it seems to me like we should really stay in the urban program, because we could get a lot more and we could do a lot more with STEEP. If it's only 120 this year, maybe a year from now it'll be 500, and maybe then we want to opt into that and stay out of urban for 4 years. I don't know. I'm just not feeling hearing a compelling reason why we should go.
I think we're all hearing that. Do you have a motion you'd like to make?
Yeah, thank you. That was my comment.
You would like to make a motion to that effect?
Well, isn't this still a council referred item, or?
Council's asked the committee to look at it again to decide which way they wanted to go. Last meeting they had, it was a toss up.
Oh, I see. So we want to go back on Monday with a new motion, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, I will make a motion then that we reverse this and that we stay in the urban program and not opt into the STEEP grant program this year, but leaving our options open for future years.
I second that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take all those, any other discussion on that motion? You really, it's really a difficult decision here, because there's nothing really, it's like walking on water. You're not sure where you're going to fall in. So it's hard to say one way or the other.
That 4 years is very troubling. It's like, why can't you still, if STEEP is like a one-time only grant of 120,000, well, why can't you still apply for urban grants? I'm not getting that part, but
well,
I
historically STEEP, they for a number of years they did them every year, and then they in the last 10 years, in the last 15 years, they missed 1 year in like 2016 or 2015, and then they missed 3 years in a row from like 2017 to 2019. Other than that, they were every year. There was some monies available, 10 to 15 million, or generally I think about 20 million. So, so from that standpoint, that's why it's set up, is they don't want communities who are able for Urban Act to opt in and take monies away from the other smaller communities on a cherry picking basis, basically. So they want them to commit into the program for a decent amount of time. So I think that's where that comes from.
Okay, so there's 3 votes for. I'm going to vote against. I voted to keep it in steep the last time. I like to get something rather than nothing. So getting something now is better than something later. I thought that would be useful, but it seems as though there's a vote of 3-1.
Excuse me, I did have my hand up, but no one's seen that. So I'm sorry that I'm interrupting. I just wanted to validate Councilor Wong, Councilor Curtin, and Councilor DiLorenzo. I think in the urban program, I think we probably need to be a little bit more intentional on what we're doing and what we're looking for. It's almost like cutting off our knees, right? I know that the pool of money is larger. I also know that the applicants are larger. But I think if we're a little bit more intentional in what we're looking for in going after those funds, I think we can be better off in the program that we're currently in. So I just wanted to add my voice to that the STEEP program, I don't think would have been beneficial to us because it's a smaller sum of money and it might be a little bit easier. Does not necessarily mean that that's the route that we need to take. Sometimes we just got to work a little harder to get a little bit more, to be a little bit more intentional for our areas of town. So I just wanted to add that to this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so again, I will go with the vote of the Admin and Education Committee, who thought this was a good idea last time. Anyway, so it's 3-1. So we'll recommend back to the council to not opt into the STEEP program. Is Jose? Yeah, Jose, you have that information. So if we can put that in for the council agenda on Monday.
I'll email Sharon.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on. Next item. Can you upgrade Marion Horn, Paula Jones, and Val Rossetti to speak on the next item, which is consider to take action regarding utility scale solar energy project policy?
Sure. Okay, they're all set.
Okay. Good evening, ladies. I don't know who's going to be speaking to present the issue to us. We have the package. We looked through it. Which of you would want to speak first?
I will do that.
Okay.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. And I would welcome Val and Paula to chime in after I've made a few brief opening remarks. You have our memo. I'm certainly not going to read that, but we do appreciate the opportunity to submit comments and speak to them to the Land Use and Economic Development Subcommittee. Our comments are offered as a source of potential additions, modifications to the Economic Development Committee's draft interim policy that was contained in the Goman and York report. And the memo we've drafted also contains points that we will ultimately be taking to the TPZ as well. So you have our memo. I just want to highlight a few key points. The first one is that CEC strongly supports the transition to renewable energy. Bloomfield has been a leader among Connecticut communities in supporting renewable energy. Secondly, the CEC supports regulatory provisions for solar generation with an initial focus on large-scale solar facilities. There are a couple of advantages to addressing those and addressing them up front. The first one is that it gives you time to get input from a broad array of diverse stakeholders, from solar installers to folks who would benefit from the solar installation, and a lot of technical expertise. And having policy and planning in place will provide important local input to the Connecticut Siting Council in its decision-making, and will hopefully avoid some of the conflicts that can arise in the siting of these projects. Now, due to the time that's required to develop priorities and regulations for siting solar arrays, and because the POCD revisions that could also address the policy and with regard to solar arrays aren't due until 2022, CEC supports the adoption of an initial ordinance and very importantly, a policy statement of the town's concerns and priorities for siting solar arrays. Some of the environmental concerns that must be considered for siting large-scale solar arrays are included in number 7 of our memo. I won't read them out, but they're we've taken them from a number of different sources, and think that they provide a pretty good range of the environmental concerns that should be taken into consideration. So with that, I'll ask Val or Paul if they have anything to add.
I would just like to thank the Economic Development Commission for starting this. I believe Michelle Bonani really saw the controversy that was generated in Simsbury when a huge piece of prime agricultural land was turned into a solar farm. And the same thing, there's now a lawsuit happening in New Milford over an area of the watershed that could be affected. And the Siting Council has jurisdiction over this, and also some of this electrical power is going to other states and not to Connecticut by this compact among Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. And so I would just echo everything Charlie said. We hope that by submitting some of the attached documents, it would be helpful, because several of the other New England states have gone through a pretty lengthy policy development about developing model ordinances, including how they recommend provisions for siting. And that's the key thing that we found, in our opinion, needed to be added to the provisional policy statement that Coleman and York provided us, is the issues around priority for siting. So that's all I have to say, but thank you for getting ahead of this before any kind of, we want to encourage the development of solar, and having a policy in place will only help prevent large-scale controversy and prohibit development. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I'll just say, Mary Ann and Val have, I think, summarized it very well. So I have nothing more to really add.
Okay. Well, maybe there'll be some questions you can answer. It seems as though it's appropriate for us to try and get ahead of this issue before the Siting Council comes to town. We've never heard any good results once they take over. There's no ability for the town to establish any criteria, any buffering, any kind of design issues and response, so forth. So it does make sense. So what you're looking at is developing a policy for less than 1 megawatt solar field developments, which would fall under their guideline or their threshold, I guess. I don't know whether we pick sites or we just pick zones, or how that policy takes shape. I have not had the chance to go through the different policies from the other states, but I'm assuming that our staff will be looking at these at some point to put together these options, because unlike the last issue, we're not up against a time frame to do something by next week. So Jose, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know whether you've seen all the documents that have been included in this package with respect to providing policy guidelines so that we can take control of our own environment. You're muted, Jose.
Hang on. Am I unmuted now?
You're good.
Yes. Yeah, obviously, to see from there's two parts of it. Yeah, actually 3 parts. There's 2 parts of this. Immediately, one is for the council to adopt a policy for greater than 1 megawatt siting in town that will give us some type of standing in front of the siting council, rather than just be seen as NIMBYs or reactionaries on a particular project. So, and I think that's what the EDC is asking the council to do. And certainly we could come up with something, given the feedback, of the CEEC and the council, to try to come up with a more detailed statement than what was in the report. The second part of it is to draft regulations for the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider for those that are under 1 megawatt, which we don't have right now. We don't have standalone, standalone regulations for standalone solar arrays. We just allow them as accessory uses to existing properties that already have an existing use on them, and they sort of like Pepperidge Farms, like the Board of Ed, and Seabury. Those are the three that pop up into my mind. So yeah, we do have time. I think the feedback that we're getting from CEC is excellent, at least on the policy, and I think they will also have something to say at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting next Thursday, a week from Thursday.
Yeah.
So are you?
I think we could, certainly can take what the EDC's taken and.
You're not there. We're losing you, Jose. So it sounds like
I'm here.
Okay, but we lost your voice. So it sounds like you're looking for the council to enunciate a general policy in this direction from which the staff could then work to prepare in more detail the siting requirements and regulations that might be considered for the TPZ. Is that what you just said? Did I get it right?
Are you addressing Jose or?
Well, no, I think what I'm looking from the council is to adopt the. Can you hear me?
No, to adopt what?
You're choppy.
Oh, I don't know.
Anybody else answer that question?
Am I still choppy?
Not when we hear you.
Okay. Let me try again. I think.
Turn your video off.
All right, I've shut my video off. Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess what I'm looking for the council to adopt is an actual detailed policy for not to guide the TPZ, but to guide the siting council. When the town is a party and does have a place on the table when there is a major facility to be sited in the town. And I think what we want to come to the table with is a policy that shows that we've thought about where we would like to see those type of facilities and how they should be operated and eventually strengthen our position. So I think that the challenge right now is to come up with that policy that we could adopt formally, and then if and when we get something of that magnitude, we can certainly go to the table with it. The other part is and which the CEC will be also commenting on is the regulations for those arrays that are under 1 megawatt, which we don't have any regulations for right now.
Okay, well,
and that we're not looking for the council. I mean, the council certainly can weigh in, or you subcommittee can. You're welcome to. Anyone's welcome to weigh in on it, but there's no formal requirement to do so. I think what we want to have is a council policy for the siting council projects.
okay, so I guess we would have to assume that the staff is going to prepare that. Could that something that would be available next month's meeting? 2 months? You have a lot of information here from CEC, which is very helpful.
Yeah, I could prepare something to have both the CEC and EDC take a look at it and see if if they think that's a policy ready to go. I think the longer range plan is maybe to have, once we have that policy in place, to maybe even add, determine where such large scale projects might be best located in town. If one comes in a place where we may think they're not suitable. And so if something comes in, we can always say, look, we've run our homework. Here's where we think solar arrays are appropriate in Bloomfield.
Okay. All right, let's go to Councilman De Lorenzo. Had your hand up.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. I was just going to say, I think Dr. Poland, I don't know if he's still on the phone here. I see Mike is still, but it looks like there is a sample interim policy statement provided in the document that Goldman in New York sent to us. I'm wondering if that could be reviewed by CEC, EDC, town attorney, and then use that as a basis to submit that to the council so that we could get something in place prior to the longer term. So there is a sample interim policy statement with about 2 pages long. And then in addition to that, there is a sample zoning provision. So maybe that would be the second piece that would come after that. So it sounds like you may have something, Jose, to start with, if I'm reading this right. And that's what we're looking for.
That's correct. Appendix 3 is and again, his comments at the beginning is it's anticipated that this will be modified, that we will modify the statement to satisfy our specific. So I think that's what, yeah, we do have a good spine and a good statement to work off of, and I think we just need to tweak it to the point where the council feels comfortable adopting it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Wong?
Yep.
Did you want to respond to Val? Did you?
I just said we haven't had a chance to review the Goldman and York documents and the sample policy, and I think what's there is good. Our major concern was that it didn't address anything about citing priorities. So we would like to see included a section that, you know, for example, in point number 7, we submitted to you about which sites themselves should be prioritized. So it has some backbone in it as far as environmental concerns. So avoiding having to put up new transmission lines, citing large arrays in previously disturbed industrial brownfields, commercial districts, you know, avoiding prime agricultural land, that sort of thing doesn't yet appear in the policy statement.
Great. So CEC will be able to funnel those into Jose, and we can put the two together. That'd be great. Councilman Wong.
Thank you. We received these this morning, so I haven't been able to look in depth for all of the attachments. But my concerns are around some of the, and my phone is too small to read this, but some of the community-based issues that we may run into that we are finding in some of the larger projects in other towns and other states have come across. And my main concerns for Bloomfield are when it comes to job creation, prioritizing our Black and Brown communities, making sure that we have equity when we develop these policies, as well as environmental justice as it relates to what areas we choose to cite. So yes, we have to take into account from an environmental standpoint where we're going to essentially have these spots, but we also have to take into account the communities in which we have that prime real estate. So I want to make sure that as we look into the policy creation and we finalize and architect kind of the last version, that's what's going to go to council, that we make sure that we do have the look through a lens of equity, environmental justice, social justice, understand the demographics of our town, who lives where, poverty levels, income levels, and just kind of fold that in and be very intentional as we present that final product. Yes, Paula?
Any disagreement on any of this? Yeah, right, thanks.
Yeah.
Any disagreement on what the councilman just said?
No, and in fact, Danielle, Councilor Wong, your point is folded into, it's one of the points, it's brief, but it's folded into item 7. And a member of the community that's doing a lot of work around this, she's reaching out to neighboring communities to try to collect additional information. That's one of the things that sort of stress make this cut. We've been working on this for not an incredibly long period of time. And you know, the whole idea is you have to do a lot of public outreach and engagement with the community and make sure you understand these implications. And that's the beauty of trying to get ahead of this and be really proactive about it. Right. So everyone agrees with what you're saying.
Yeah, and please leverage the council in that opportunity to reach out to the public in any avenue. I'm happy to get involved in that outreach if there's an opportunity as we finalize that policy.
That's great.
Councilman Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do echo some of the same sentiments my colleague did outline, and I just want to say I appreciate the work that this committee is doing, and I think it's an example of, you know, what actual community members volunteering and giving their service and the results that we see over the years. The one thing I wanted to say, Valerie, you made a point about utilities pole wires being underground. Is that something that you had reference to? Did I miss that? You just mentioned.
No, I just mentioned in general the siting. If you have to put up big new transmission lines in order to hook mega solar array up that's producing power just to feed into the power grid.
Okay.
Advantageous to site it where you don't have to set up a whole new series of transmission lines to transfer the electricity back into the grid.
Got you. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, but I don't have any more comments right now. I didn't get to read the entire document, but once again, I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Well, I think that, is there any other discussion at this point?
I
just wanted to
Mary Ann.
yes, I just wanted to in the documents that we provided to you, in the Rhode Island document, it provides principles for renewable energy siting, and I think that's a very good example of what we're looking at. And also the Hudson Valley, it's almost more like a PowerPoint presentation, but it lists many of the points that we've listed, but it goes into more explanation about what those points are about. So I think with that overarching policy in place, then the regulations will flow from that.
Val, follow up?
No, I just wanted to cite the Rhode Island policy. Councillor Wong, when you look at that, when you have a chance to look at it, they went through a large process with many stakeholders, and then they had multiple statewide community participation to help develop the policies. And you know, this is perhaps what we read in the news today, that Eversource and UI have been fined because, for example, the community solar array that's behind our Board of Education did not adequately, inform or market the opportunity to purchase that lower cost power to low income residents. So 20% of that was supposed to be afforded our low income residents, and it never really got publicized or made, So that's one issue. And the other, totally, I mean, we want to cite these things so there is environmental justice, and that does come up with conflicts because you don't necessarily want to put a huge solar array in an area that's, already got its own scenic problems because it's not.
Well, that issue, I did see that in the paper today, and it raises a lot of questions that probably should be answered or discussed elsewhere. But my thought was, if we're going to do a large solar array, there should be some sort of shared solar in it also. But if it's not working, we have to make the shared solar concept work too. But thank you for your hard work and insights. It was because of the CEC that this town got ahead of solar energy and home energy audits, and has distinguished itself around the state, and it's for your hard work. And we appreciate that. And I look forward to next month, perhaps we'll have a consolidated resolution and some direction with staff input, and we'll see where we go from there.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Just before you go, I have my hands up. I don't know if you noticed.
Oh, I didn't see. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to just make a comment that I think Val said it in regards to outreach. I think part of this is there has been a lack of education around it, and I think if this committee can find a way how we could better inform our community and the benefits, because I believe if people have an understanding, they'll buy into it. But if you recall, Mr. Chair, I think I don't know if it's a year or a couple of years ago, we had a presentation at the community center on this topic, and not a lot of folks showed up when it comes to solar and the benefit and the savings around it. So I believe that we need to find a way how to educate folks on the benefits of going that route, because I think a lot of information is there, but it's not getting to the folks who will then buy into it. So I think that's something that we need to work on.
Well, thank you, Councilman Curtin. But if I'm not mistaken, there was somebody hired for that sole purpose of going around to the neighborhoods and see if there's interest.
No, correct. But I still believe that this
I'm
committee,
asking-
I still believe this committee can play a role as well. Yeah.
Well, if you have any recommendations from the CEC, we'd be glad to hear them too, because
Yeah.
we don't,
Yeah.
where do we start?
Can I say that it's been a little bit crazier now that everybody's getting involved in the project, right? Because at least on my street, we've had at least 3 different people come through with their product and how their product is gonna, help individuals, and each of them have a different spiel, right? So I think it's very important to make sure that our residents have the proper information so that they can make an informed decision. And I think maybe coming from this group, it's a little bit more believable because we're not trying to sell them anything. We're not trying to benefit from anything. We're trying to give them the information so that they can benefit. So I think that's probably something just for you ladies to think about as well.
Yep. So thank you very much. We look forward to further information. Paul, you have one last thing. Did you want to say?
Oh, I just wanted to comment that that's one thing CEC has been concerned about is more effective communication to the community. And there is a citizen volunteer that is trying to help with that. So, it's good feedback from the subcommittee. Thank you.
That's what we have to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item is staff reports. Jose?
Okay, just a couple of things on the complete street status.
Video off.
Still pending before your committees as I've been.
Jose, can you take your picture off? Maybe that would help the sound.
All right, I don't know what's the.
You have.
I don't know how to take the picture.
You're fine. That's good. It sounds better already.
I took the video off. Can you hear?
Yeah, sounds better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I took the video off. So I guess I must have a bandwidth issue. So in any case, the complete streets. I've been trying to get I know we've been waiting to get different points of views from committees. Planning and Zoning Commission was on their last agenda, but kind of went late and didn't get around to it. So I'm putting it back on for next Thursday's discussion. I don't think we have any real applications to consider. So maybe we'll be able to handle some planning topics. So we'll hopefully come up with a maybe or maybe not have a consensus from the commission on the policy statement. In any case, after that meeting, I think I'll come up with a staff recommendation on how to proceed. We still have one more public hearing from the consultant that we are owed. He's just waiting for us to tell him when and where. And I think at that point we'll open it up to the public, including all the groups that participated. I know the Octagon was very much involved in it and all that. So and then have the council take up the policy discussion. In terms of development inquiries and project updates, I think you got my report. I think I'm still trying to get Jonathan to finish up his portion of it. A couple of other things I just want to mention under that. ABB, which bought 45 Griffin Road South and moved upwards of 200 plus employees from their Plainville operations to Bloomfield and spent millions of dollars in upgrades to their building, is adding another 5,000 square feet to the building, which is a good sign. And on the 26th, I think you alluded to it, Mr. Chairman, there is a public informational meeting on the 50% design of the Lower Blue Hills Avenue streetscape project. So that's a chance for people to hear from our engineering department and our consulting engineers as to where the project stands before we go ahead with the second half of the project and finish up the design. So I encourage people to attend. It's at 6:30, and I believe the link to the Zoom meeting is up on the town's webpage, the first page of our homepage. So I encourage people to sign up and attend and give their input.
Jose?
Yep.
You finished with your report?
Yes.
Question, can you tell us what happened on 93 East Morningside for the Habitat for Humanity? That was a project we thought was,
Yeah.
done. What happened?
Well, if you look at our wetlands map, there isn't a wetland, within anywhere in sight on the map. Unfortunately, when we thought it'd be a great project to give to Habitat, when we went on and did a site visit during the spring, our wetlands and engineering crew noticed there was a lot of standing water and a lot of water flowing through that property, and come to find out that property, which is a town-owned property, is taking a lot of the drainage from the neighborhood and channeling it along the western boundary under a pipe to and I guess passing it through to where it's ultimately discharges. So we tried. We were gonna apply for a wetlands.
Lost you.
They basically said, you know what, it's gonna, we probably can build something on there, but it might not be the best place to have a family, because we're always going to have a bunch of drainage easements and very little backyard. So they basically pulled out that it's not worth our while to go through with this, even though we were going to apply for the wetland permit. But those things that we only could see when we visited the site during the review stage.
So does that imply that the town should be looking to sell it to the abutting owners and get rid of it, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know if I mean, that's an option, is to put it up, put it up to ask the abutting owners if they want to buy it. Right now, they're if it's not developable, if I'm the abutting owner, I'd ask myself, well, is my taxes going to go up if I own half of this thing, or if not? So I don't know what the next step is. But
the other side of that is, since it's town-owned property, you have to maintain it.
Yeah, it is, and it does take water. There is a swale and a pipe that does carry some of our drainage through. So that's that we definitely have to maintain. The rest of the site, we can approach the owners and see if there's any interest on either side, or even just one of them might want to have the whole thing and have a nice big yard.
Okay. Any other questions for Jose? Okay. Well, I guess we'll move on to any other business for the committee to discuss at this hour. Public comments? Is there anybody still in the room?
There is one from Brenda Watson regarding the information with the utility scale solar energy policy. She was just saying that, can the committee share information and materials to folks applying for energy assistance and other basic needs via human and social and senior services?
I'm not sure who that's directed towards.
I think, Mr. Chair, I think that that comment was directed to the CEC, I think. But
Yeah.
I think you missed it during the
okay.
The conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we pass that along to the CEC, India, for them to consider?
Yes.
Okay. That leaves approval of minutes is the last item. Anybody have you have a motion?
Councilor Di Lorenzo have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just raised my hand. If I just had one question for Jose.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Jose, I know I didn't see it in your report, and maybe I missed it. But again, just curious, is there anything you could tell us about what's going on in the town of Bloomfield with regard to COVID-19 and some of the establishments in town? I'm seeing that there's still a lot of restaurants that aren't even open yet, and for even takeout or anything. And I'm really getting concerned that a lot of them are going to be pulling out and not even ever opening again. So do you have a quick update on what's been happening as far as the businesses in town?
Well, yeah, and early on when this first started, we had Goldman and York call around to all the restaurants just to find out if there was any interest in outdoor dining expansion, because we were going
Right.
to come up and interest, and everybody was going to. The governor opened up interior, and then when stuff for interior, they started. Yeah, the people reluctant to go inside. Some of them I know. Carbones was looking to do an outside area at Winterbury Mall. He and his landlord could not get along, and stands. We were ready and willing to help him establish that. Also, Elizabeth had a talk to us, and I suggested he has to get it. Obviously, get it. That's a tight parking lot. He had to get his owner's permission. Other than that, we do have a ad hoc committee that's dedicated to long range economic recovery that's going to meet tomorrow afternoon for a preliminary organizational meeting, where I'm sure some of these topics will come up. And I think one of the things we're going to do is poll different businesses as to where they stand and what type of resources that we can bring to bear to help them with this. So there is some intentional things happening starting with that committee, I believe.
Okay, good. And I think, I mean, eventually we're supposed to get some kind of funds from DC, right? Can any of that be used to help? Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things Mike Goldman's going to be in on that meeting along with Don and Denise Robideau. So hopefully we can bring their resources to help us out, identify these, because there's a lot of different things happening, between the state and the feds that we just need someone to keep an eye on it and let us know and help us apply for these things.
Okay, thank you. And will you send out an update after the meeting tomorrow so we kind of know? Because I'm sure I will attend that, but just a quick update on what transpired.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Councilman Curtin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to follow up on the comments that my colleague, Councilor Di Lorenzo, was making in regards to the recovery. I think a factor is that businesses may have some sort of challenges that they may need help with. So I think it's imperative that that committee, and I'm happy to hear that, they're going to be meeting to discuss how they move forward, because we definitely need to reach out to those businesses, because, yeah, we should be concerned. It's been, 8-9 months since, no, not 8-9 months. That's for something else. It's been almost six months or so that we've been going through this. And I think there was a restaurant, the one in Winterbury Mall, did that close? That's the, what is the, oh my gosh. What is that?
Thai Palace.
Huh? Thai Palace. Did Thai Palace close?
They look like they did. And then a week later, they talked to the owner and he said, give it a shot. But it closed their doors and I talked to the agent. They leasing agent thought they were out of there, but a week later I saw them opening up again. So they are open for business, as far as I know, at least for takeout.
Okay, so that's awesome.
I'm not sure they're not. I don't think they're open.
Yeah, that's a good restaurant in town, and I would have, hate to see them go. So I'm happy to hear that. So yeah, so I'm like Councilor Di Lorenzo. I'm looking forward to that report to see exactly what sort of steps the committee is taking to help facilitate with the state and our local businesses to try to get some help or at least guide them in the right path on some of those needs that they may be in need of. Thank you.
Okay, you are.
Anything else on this before we move on? Yeah, good luck tomorrow. It's going to be your first meeting. Going to be very difficult figuring out where you're going to go with it from here.
Is that meeting? Sorry, Mr. Chair. Is that meeting tomorrow live? I mean, is it open on Zoom?
No, it's just like it is. It's just an ad hoc meeting with Michelle Bononi and I think Vera Winfrey, who's the chair. The two coordinators were. So it's not. It wasn't advertised as an open meeting. It was just a,
Okay, got you. Okay,
it was a rough organizational meeting, really, just to
got you. Okay.
figure out
Okay,
how we're
perfect.
going to organize it, whether or not we need other people on the committee or not, I believe, and
Okay.
just to sort of get our feet wet.
No, that's good enough. Thank you.
Okay, let's go into the approval of minutes. Is there a motion on the floor?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All right, I have one correction for India on the third page, right at the bottom, it's Pent Road rather than Pembroke Road. That's the only
Okay.
change I would have. With the motion on the floor made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So ordered. Okay, we're looking for a motion of adjournment.
So move.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, well, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Aye.